I want to talk about World War III. We're all in the middle of it, aren't we? It seems to be very crazy. It's a crazy time. And I am here to assure you that we're in the middle of a war. In the West, in America in particular, nobody's calling it a war. They're calling it a build-up to a confrontation sometime in the future. But make no mistake, it's a war. It's going on. And we're all in the midst of it. There's casualties in this war, but this war is not like the other wars. We are of a mindset to assume that a war is a kinetic hot war, that there will be nuclear explosions. All this, fighting and battles and death, they may not be. But a war is a conflict of ideologies and generalized control over people, places, and things. And that's exactly what's going on right now, isn't it? You have the United States and its proxy nations demanding that the world conform to the United States or else. And the rest of the world saying, I don't like that idea. Stay away from us. Leave us alone, please. Thank you very much. Divided into an East and a West. The West is the United States and its proxy nations. The East is everybody else, including South America, Africa, the Middle East, Russia, China, Asia, all the stands. Much of the South Pacific, much of the Pacific, with notable exceptions of Australia, Japan, and of course, Europe. And I can go into the various details and aspects of this war. Because people, you have to understand, a war is a war is a war is a war. It doesn't matter if it's a hybrid war, an economic war, an ideological war, a cultural war. A war is a war. And there's multiple wars going on right now. And there's multiple flashing alarm bells going on right now. And because the United States and the unipolar movement, the West, cannot bend and bring the rest of the world to its knees, it's getting more and more desperate. It's crossing red lines, pushing nations to fight. It pushed Russia to fight. Soon it will be pushing China to fight. You may not want to hear it, but that's what it is. Now, the United States has been waging biological warfare upon China now ever since the Obama administration. Oh, certainly before that, there were trial runs of various bioweapons, targeting chicken, targeting some people. But that's throughout the whole world. The bioweapon spiel and story is quite a mature one. What I'm talking about when I refer to war is the recognition of member states that they are at a war. Obviously, the United States government knows that it's at a war. Obviously. I mean, look at what it's doing. Maybe the President Biden doesn't realize it, but the entire United States is geared towards war. And it's pushing. So obviously the United States knows it's in a war. Whether it's a hybrid war, a physical war, a war of proxy, it doesn't matter, it's at war. Russia and China both have announced that they consider themselves in a war situation at various levels. Whether it's biological, as they said at the UN, and what they said during the 4th of February declaration, or something else, it doesn't matter the details, just the recognition that China and Russia combined together to oppose the joint efforts of the West. So you have a war. This is a war. Now, I have discussed this over and over again about the tit-for-tat shooting wars between the United States and China. I have also discussed in great detail and depth about the biological carpet bombing of China to induce famine, as well as to cause trouble with the 3 bioweapons targeting humans. That was very, very nasty. China hasn't done anything about that, strangely enough. Or have they? In any event, there's a series of wars going on, and you, as spectators in this sorry state of affairs, are probably running around concerned about it, and you should be. There are looming economic bubbles, as the entire foundation of what the United States and the West is built upon is crumbling to the ground. Unqualified people are running things, meaning they might be self-made wealthy people, but they don't understand the levers of power that they are now appointed to run. And that can be a problem, and that's what we're seeing right now. Every single person that you see in the West, in the United States, whether it's a newscaster or a politician, are all actors playing roles. It's a big puppet show. It's a big charade. The United States domestically is going down the tubes. I'm getting reports constantly about all the craziness going on. I even hear that there are teachers that color their hair green and purple and shave the one side of them off and don't even call themselves a woman. They use another term, ziz or something else, some made up term. And I believe these reports. I haven't seen them with my own 2 eyes, but I believe them. And it's not because I want to believe them. It's that it just seems to be a natural progression of a decay within society, within the benchmarks of these structures that are inside of society. China is learning from all the mistakes it's going through in America. So you're seeing China being the absolute opposite in every way. While the educational system in the United States seems to be focused on Black Lives Matter and revisionism and banning George Orwell, China instead insists on merit, exercise, discipline, and military training. It's like night and day. Well, America and the West is focused on delicious, greasy, fast food, deep-fried items made fast with GMO-laden products with long shelf lives. China focuses on fresh, GMO-free foods, kept clean, and provided in tasty, pleasant, and delicious manners. It's like night and day. While America and the West believe in the individual rights and the individual freedoms, and they talk loudly about it, they don't protect it. So it doesn't really exist. Meanwhile, in China, they realize that there's ideals, but you're part of a community. So it's a community. China is community-driven. United States is individual-driven. So people ask me, they say, well, the United States is going to be better than anything in the rest of the world because we have individual rights, we're individualist, and we're granted to be individuals by God. And the rest of the world, led by China, is saying it's community function. You have to work by a community. You have to work as part of a team. And this dichotomy of working as a team as opposed to working as individuals can be illustrated by a simple mind exercise. Consider a basketball team working together, trained, up against one lone star basketball player. That lone basketball player must be one hell of a great basketball player to take on an entire organized team. Usually, and you should expect that the team will always outplay that exceptional individual. So when people ask me what's going to be the outcome of any conflict between East and West, my retort is always the same. Community always wins over individuality. Merit-driven societies always surpass that of selfish, self-centered societies. So, keeping that in mind, realize that a STEM-based society, science, technology, engineering, manufacturing, STEM, such as China, will always surpass that of fire, finance, real estate, economics, accounting. If the West wants to sell hamburgers back and forth to each other, that's fine. But that's not what the West wants to do. The unipolar belief is one where the West sits on top of a pyramid and the rest of the world serves it. the United States has taken the resources from the rest of the world, whether it's Africa, South America, China, Russia, and offered paper in exchange. These mounds of paper builds up and builds up, first in the millions, then in the billions, then in the trillions, and then the United States says, we own your paper. That's what they just said with Russia, right? Scared the living shit out of the rest of the world. So you know what the rest of the world now is doing? That's right, it's World War III. They're saying, we don't want your paper anymore. We don't want your paper anymore. And that is causing the nations that use the paper for skyrocketing inflation. So, but if you're in the West, you're not aware of this. You think the whole world is under inflation. It's not. It's only you. It's only your life. And you think that there's a pandemic because it's natural. Or you think, oh, China made a pandemic. And I'm here to ground you, okay? It's a war. United States have been bioweapon bombing China for a long time now. China is aware of it and is in DEFCON. I call it DEFCON because that's the American term. China has a totally different term for it. But yeah, it's a state of war, it's a state of military readiness. That's why everybody in China wears masks. That's why we're all constantly being swabbed. That's why there's various city lockdowns. It's because China is at a state of war. And China's been very, very, very polite about all this. But China is decoupling. The United States is decoupling, China's decoupling. The timetable, according to Rand, is somewhere 2003, 2004, culminating before 2005. So the hot period, the hot seat's going to be next year and the year after. Who is going to suffer from the hot seat? Maybe the whole world if it goes really bad. But my guess is the biggest victims will probably be those in the West. You can mitigate the influence of these negative forces simply by participating in your community, using prudent traditional methods of gardening, building up a larder, and being conservative. Use a bike instead of a car, and working with other people, providing services, whatever they may be. Now, the first part of this discussion here is to say that we're at a state of war. So I want to underline that. The world is at a state of war. It's not a build-up to war. It's a state of war. This state of war has not hit a climax yet. Worst case scenario, the climax will go nuclear. But we're at a state of war right now, the world is, and after the climax occurs, you're going to see a total changes in a host of social and economic behaviors. A lot of it's going to be driven by the United States and the United States people and people in Europe. They're going to start saying, I don't really want to watch these television shows. I really want to ride a bike rather than drive a car and maintain an expensive car. They're going to start saying things like, you know, I don't want a purple-haired transgender teaching my kids. I think I'm just going to have a local community school with maybe the kids from my neighborhood. They're going to start coming up with other systems because these traditional systems have failed. So that's what we can look forward to, a different reality once we pass over this upcoming peak, this peak crisis event. I can tell you that forces, whether it's domain or the commando and other things, are trying to keep these events into little bads, not big bads. Nobody wants a big bad, except maybe an idiot, and there's a lot of them out in the West right now. So, with that being said, think about how you're going to handle these peak crisis events, because it's going to be a series of them. And it will depend where you live geographically, and what your social economic situation is will determine on how you survive this contentious period in time that's up and coming. There's a lot up in the air. It's true. So what I'm trying to say here is, don't think in terms of set defined events in so much as trends, trend lines, behavioral alterations. And then the world will pass through this period of change, and most of the world will be unscathed. It'll be okay for most of the world. Provided, of course, the United States doesn't pick up the board and flip it over and say, fuck it. Which they might do. You seen Mike Pompeo, Tom Cotton, Kamala Harris? You seen these people? Hillary Clinton? That's a possibility, right? Huh? So, but I like to think that there are systems in place that's not going to allow that to happen. One of the systems in place is Russia and China, which says, you know what, there's a high probability that that might happen. I think maybe we're just going to preempt that. Preemptive actions. That's what happened in the Ukraine, right? Russia entered the Donbass. Military technical measures when they begged, when they pleaded, please obey the contracts you signed. They didn't. So Russia came in. So it's very, very crucially important to realize that while it's a dangerous time, these peak events may or may not occur. The focus you have to have is in trend lines, vector changes. And vector changes is what you want to ride on. You want to use these changes to leave this up and coming bubble period, these crisis periods, unscathed. And that's what you want. What do you know? So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about what we can do as we go through these. So what can you do? Crises. One, you know that the world is at war. Number two, their systems are being disrupted. Number three, all the major players are aware of periods of change. And number four, they are breaking up and fracturing into groups, demanding no change or demanding radical change. Within this backdrop, you have you, and you have to be ready for it. There's a subculture in the United States known as shit hit the fan, SHIF, and preppers, which believe in always being ready for a worst case scenario. I myself think that that's good, prudent advice, though some of them just take it and run with it, and it's totally living off the grid and all that. And there's some good words of wisdom within that. But what I'm here to tell you is that may not be necessary. It may not be necessary depending upon where you live. If you are a prepper or are prepared for events such as this, and you think that as soon as you get the go-ahead that you are going to scram into the latest national forest, I got news for you guys. Do you know what happened whenever the coronavirus broke in California and everybody had to start wearing masks? Yeah, everybody emptied San Francisco, Los Angeles, and they went into the state forests there. It looked like giant parking lots for miles and miles, and everybody just started thinking that they could forage off the land. I don't think that that's a good idea to do. I think you need to shelter in place and make do with what you have. And that means versatile. Be versatile. It means to be part of a community. You can weather out the storm if you're part of a community. Say you're with a group of 30 others. Maybe that consists of 10 armed people that's willing to work together to defend the area. The rest provides various services, whether it's fishing, food, preparations, medical, whatever it may be. Worst case scenario, you got it covered. Now, in this period of change, you will not, or you probably won't, unless worst case scenarios occur, you probably will not see a breakdown in the government. The government will still be functioning. Poorly, but it'll still be functioning. For instance, throughout the American urban areas where you have lawlessness taking over, the stores have moved out. You'll see downtowns boxed up and boarded up. You'll see a lot of homeless all over there. You'll see armies of social justice warriors, but very few actual policemen. And when they do go in those areas, they go in mass. You can expect that kind of behavior. An absence of general law-abiding order with an occasional visit by government structures for assistance or support. You need to plan for that. Not expect the cavalry to come in and rescue you, but you need to plan on being part of your community. What you don't want to do is abandon where you are, go on the road to some other safer place that you think is safer, where you're a stranger, and come into a community. And they're not going to care whether you're toting 3 kids and a pregnant wife. They're not going to care. Depends where you're at. And if you think that the Bible Belt in the deep American South is going to sit there and welcome you, I got news for you. They are closed societies. Do not expect them to be all that welcoming. Now is the time that you need to be part of your community. Now is the time that you need to have a larder. And now is the time where you need to prepare for whatever may occur. And that means, too, to consider a situation where internet still works, electricity is still there, running water is still possible, but there's rampant crime. The money is worth nothing. and hordes of hungry people are knocking on your door. We don't know what the future holds, but whatever it is, do not believe the coronavirus is a hoax. Just because the minor variant hit the United States and the West does not mean that the major variant won't follow. John Bolton and Donald Trump laid some pretty nasty eggs in China in 2020. That tick virus that hit Beijing. By the way, there's no ticks at all in Beijing, or even the northern part of China. So it's causes your internal organs to liquefy, and then you vomit them out uncontrollably. Who's to say that that might not be floating around? Somebody sneezes, somebody touches the handle on your car, suddenly you get it. In a world where China's no longer shipping medicines to the United States because of sanctions. America's gone sanction crazy, don't you think? I think so. Basic prep, basic control. You need to control your mind. You need to center your consciousness. You can use Hemisync. You can use meditation. Fresh air, fresh water, good fresh food. Cut way down on the fast food, guys. Walk more, ride a bike more, talk more. A lot more face-to-face communications with other people, and you'll be fine. You'll be just fine. And that's how you get through this period of change. And I don't know. I really don't know how bad it's going to be. I have no crystal ball. But what I can tell you is that the changes are going to accelerate to a point in time where they are not sustainable. For instance, the United States can still conduct military maneuvers, can still make military weapons, can still run its subs here and there. It still can do it. When it can't do it because of logistical problems, that's when the worm has turned and you're over the hump. American, I'm going to tell you that don't wait for the United States government, your next batch of elections, to make any difference. It's not going to be driven by electoral changes. It's going to be driven by a number of vectors, a number of events that are beginning to come to a head. Part of it is obvious. The economic bubbles and the decline of the value of the United States dollar. That's one. A collapse of trade and a collapse of vegetables and produce. That'll be another. Social upheavals. BLM, social justice warriors, tech wars from Silicon Valley, ABCs, all these alphabet groups that the United States government has set up, fully well-funded, big organizations. They're going to start changing in some way. Unknown which way. I don't know. They could all have complete meltdowns, or people walk off the jobs till they become their own armies. Who knows what's going to happen? Now there will be upheavals throughout the world. China too, but I think China is better able to handle upheavals because it's all sense of community. It's all very well organized. The nations that will have the worst upheavals are the ones that are undergoing the worst periods of change right now, which is obviously the West. And you're witnessing it. You can't deny what I'm just saying. You may disagree with what I have to say about China, but you don't know China because you're not here. You're not in China, so you don't see what I see. You don't come to the same conclusions that I come to because your vision of China is one that's colored to describe something that it is not. But you do see what's around you, and that's what you need to focus on. Focus on the world around you. Focus on what's going on around you. Focus on your community. I'm going to keep underlining that. Community, community, community. You may not need to ever pick up a gun, but you do need to participate in your community. And if your community doesn't have a venue for participation, you have the responsibility to organize one. Yes, you. It could be a group of irregulars that just talk on ham radios in Australia, or it could be a group that has normal patrols, crime watch groups, or it could be a group that bands together resources for a group pantry. Start thinking in terms of small units, small communities banding together. It does not replace the systems that's already there. It supplements them. Supplements them. You still have police, you still have government, you still have the IRS, you still have all this stuff. But you have your own little regional community to help people out. Like what was there in America during the Great Depression of the 1920s, where people worked, set up food kitchens, provided services to each other. Whatever you do, do not leave thinking that the grass is greener somewhere else in your area. If you're going to leave, you bail from the entire country and make sure that where you go to is one that you have resources set up. When I bailed and moved to China, I had some money in the bank, I had people to contact, and I had places to stay. That's a bare minimum that you need to have. Also, recognize that you may not be able to take everything with you. You may end up losing everything. I arrived in China with the clothes on my back, literally. I wore flip-flops and socks and scrub top and scrub bottoms. Those were my clothes. That's what I wore for a couple of weeks until I could get better settled. You make do with what you have. And I'm also here to tell you that it's not going to be as bad as you fear. Nothing is always as bad as you fear. So don't fear it. Don't fear. Prepare. Prepare. Is there anything that I'm saying that you don't like to hear? Maybe you don't want to hear about what China is different and China's going to be all right. I know, maybe, after reading all this, hate China, hate China, hate China, well, then you could ignore that. You can cut that out and don't listen to that part. But focus on your life. Focus on what you see. Focus on your community. Focus on your family. Prudent measures should always be your top priority right now. It's April. You should be considering making a little garden and trying a hand at raising some chickens. That might be good. Learning how to fish a little bit, if you've got some water nearby, would also be a good thing. Doesn't mean you change your lifestyle. You just branch out in other areas. If you want to start another skill that might be of use to your community, consider beer making. Consider taking some classes in first aid. Consider being able to repair electronics or fix things. It's always a good thing to have skills. Doesn't mean you'll ever use them. I learned COBOL, never used a damn thing. But for a while there, I had it under my belt. And I could use it if I needed to. So I'm going to wrap this up here, guys. Getting a little long in the tooth. Well, the world is at a state of World War III. History books will write about this period of change. They will write about the fracturing of the unipolar order into a bipolar order of East and West. They may write about the decay of the Western order. That may be a part of this, but we don't know. What we do know is that there's going to be a peak event sequence that'll happen starting next year. Yeah, starting next year. Probably last 1 or 2 years. And then a long 10-year period of readaptation. By the time 2030 rolls around, 2035 maybe, things will be okay. And you'll be fine. In the meantime, don't get too upset. Just be prudent, be traditional. Okay? And if you think that you can withstand zombie hordes by having 60 firearms in your house, you're being a fool. You need only one gun and be part of a community. That's the realistic assessment of survival. Be part of a community, do your best. And at that, guys, I want to end up with my basic words of advice. Be good. Smile. Make a difference in the world that you live in. Be good to dogs, cats. Be helpful. Be the Rufus. Participate. Don't be a spectator. And when the situation calls, take action. And at that, guys, remember, I leave